Israel is over here in southern Judah in captivity, it's because they went after Baal in the grove, right? That's why they're there. That's why they're under the rule of all these empires. While they're under the rule of the Grecian Empire, Alexander the Great gives all of the world, all of its dialects, and all of its glossa, all of its philosophy, and all of its idioms and metaphors. Particularly, it gave them your two most popular philosophies, the Stoics and the Epicureans. Of course, Paul is always using Stoic philosophy, and he's talking in this manner so he can reach those Greek people. In the first century, when Rome is ruling, they had a Greek. And let me tell you this. I was telling some of the guys at the house the other night. They had Greek culture, they had Greek languages, they had Greek dialects and Greek glossa. Why didn't they have Roman glossa and Roman dialects? Well, there was some Latin, but most of the world was speaking a form of the Greek. That's because, and why weren't they using Roman culture? The Romans were so barbaric that they didn't have a lot of culture. The most culturalized people had been the Greeks. And when I say culture, I'm talking about philosophies, idioms, metaphors, what they followed after, Paul would use the cultural language of the day. For instance, he would say to Titus when he was pastoring at Crete, he would say, the Christians are always slow bellies, they're liars. The belly, according to Epicurean philosophy, read about Epicurus, read the philosophy if you get something on that. According to the Epicureans, the belly was the seat of all spiritual, all the sensuality of man was seated in his belly, and it didn't mean the stomach. It meant the emotions, the spleen. It meant what exuded all of your feelings, all your spiritual desires came from the belly. That's why Paul said to a Philippian Gentile church who knew all about the philosophies of the Stoics and the Epicureans, he said, the men hate the cross of Christ, or the daily cross, because their God is their belly. That was Epicurean term. And they had all kinds of figures of speech in this. I won't go into a lot of them because I got too many things to get to. So you got to study Epicureans, you got to study history, you got to study the idioms, the metaphors, the sayings, the definition. Now, let me say something to you that I was telling some of the guys at the house. I don't know if I made it clear. The word Hellas, H-E-L-L-E-S, Hellas. Hellas was a term or a name for Greece for a country when it was Grecianized, or when it was made a cultural nation of Greece. You were said to be Hellenized. So if you see any books that, I've got one book that says, something like, I believe it's Jews and Hellenism. What that's talking about is the Jews in the first century, and even up to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century, how the Grecian world affected them and how their culture affected them. So if you see something that's talking about Hellas, it's very important when you're understanding first century understanding, because when Paul was writing to people, he was talking about Greek culture, Greek language, Greek, everything that was Greek, and the Romans had retained all of the Greek culture. That's why the Bible will say there's neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither male nor female. There's neither bond nor free. We're all one in Christ. It doesn't say there's neither Jew nor Roman, because all Romans, everyone that was a Gentile, was called a Greek, because they were all speaking of Greek language and using Greek culture. Now, where did this tongue thing, it all goes back to here. Back to Israel being carried away captivity because of their apostasy. And I'm not going to get into all of the decrees to go back and rebuild Israel, rebuild the temple and rebuild Jerusalem. Well, I will just say there's one other. It was given in 444 BC. And that was given, well, there was two others. One in 457 BC, and that was given by Artaxerxes. I'll write that down. I like that name. Artaxerxes. I want to get me a great big dog one name and name him Artaxerxes. A big Great Dane or something. I think that'd fit him. Okay, now. And of course, Artaxerxes gave the decree to Ezra to go back in 457 and to take supplies for the temple, more priesthood, and to help with the temple that Darius had given the decree for the Jews to finish. And you got to remember, they were leaving Babylon, coming all the way over here about 750 miles to rebuild the temple that had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Now, while under Alexander the Great, he gave them all of the dialects and all the glossa. These are the two words that have been ambiguously, whatever that means, means it can have a shady meaning and have a dual meaning, have been translated into one word, T-O-N-G-U-E. Well, the reason I'm saying this is to tie this with the halakah. Now, gloss is the word foreign language. Foreign language. And dialectos is the word dialect. And they had a different dialect of the Koine, K-O-I-N-E. I'll get it in a minute. I'm too close to the board. K-O-I-N-E. Koine is the word common. And there was a common street language of the Greek dialect in every city-state. A city-state ruled from a city to the borders of that province. It would be like Nashville rules to the borders of Tennessee. If we lived in the ancient world, we'd speak a different dialect of the English if you transported us back then with the same parallel situation. We'd speak a different dialect than the people in Georgia, and they'd speak a different dialect from the people in Mississippi. And these dialects would differ as much as two foreign languages, like Spanish and Italian in our day and time, and both of them are Latin languages, but just because you can understand one don't mean you can understand the other. Now, all this came about, Alexander the Great gave all the world its culture, but this had been building. He was only 26 years old, or about 30 years old when he died. You have to understand, Alexander the Great didn't come up with all this. He just pulled all this in from 800 years of development and said, we're going to give this to the whole world. And that's what he did. So, and Israel is in captivity under all these people. Well, under these empires here. Well, Israel had, Exodus 23, all the males in Israel had to go back to these 3 feast days. And y'all know what these are, and I'm not just saying these for you. I've got a microphone on, and I've got a camera on me. If all I had to preach to was the people here that knew this, I wouldn't say it. I'd say, y'all know the story. People are watching me. They may be watching for the first time. They may be getting the DVD for the first time, and I want them to know this. Now, Israel had 3 feast days. They had Passover. They had Pentecost. And they had the feast of Ingathering. And another title for that is Feast of Huts. They lived in little huts commemorating their time in the wilderness. And they still do that in New York City, in some of these bigger cities like Chicago. And that was coupled, since this was in the 7th month, the Feast of Ingathering. The 7th month is Tishri. And Tishri is our month, September, October. Their months didn't exactly coincide with the 1st and the 30th, so you have to say September, October. And of course, Passover was in the 1st month of their ecclesiastical year, 1st month, and the 1st month was Nisan, and that's our month, April, May. March, April, excuse me. This is March, April, and they had a 7th month ecclesiastical or religious calendar that started in their 1st month. That's the 1st month of their year. Our 1st month is January. The 1st month to them was March, April. And they called it Nisan. And their 7th month, the last month of their religious year was September, October, 50 days after Passover. We know the first Passover was in Exodus, the 12th chapter, wasn't it?